Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for It's Not That Simple, Understanding Policy and How It Affects Women, presented by Kayla Bailey. This is the final talk in our Lenses of Gender series. These lunchtime talks are part of the Center for Community Engagement's 2021-22 program series, Understanding Gender, which also includes two exhibitions. The Glass Ceiling, curated by Ophelia Chambliss, is a series of paintings, stories, testimonials, and spoken and written word pieces by women that addresses the issues of realizing, reaching, and breaking the glass ceiling to success in their careers and personal lives. This exhibition is on view at the Center for Community Engagement building in downtown York through May 31st. Engendered, which features work by artists addressing gender identity in a variety of ways that include examining their own relationship to established gender norms and expectations, responding to the heteronormative male-female binary, and asserting queerness as a fluid alternative to the idea of a stable gender identity. This exhibition is on view at our Market View Arts building through May 21st. So now I'd like to introduce our presenter today. Kayla Bailey is a York County native and is originally from Seattle. Kayla serves as the prevention coordinator for the Title IX office at York College of Pennsylvania. Kayla obtained her BSW from Shippensburg University in 2015. Her work supporting survivors and victims of gender-based violence started as an undergraduate peer advocate and has continued since then as she has brought her work back to York County. So Kayla, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I will apologize in advance for my scratchiness. Getting over a little bug. So welcome. This is It's Not That Simple, Understanding Policy and How It Affects Women. Thank you for joining me on your lunchtime today. I appreciate it. A couple things is my name, as Rebecca said, is Kayla Bailey. I use she, her pronouns. I am the York College Title IX Prevention Coordinator, which means I help oversee our orientation, our prevention modules, and education for incoming and new students. Some fun facts is that I am originally from Seattle, so I'm a really big Seahawks and Mariners fan. I love Starbucks. I'm always down for it. And I'm a really big Marvel fan. Before my time at York College, I was a victim witness coordinator for the York County District Attorney's Office, and I worked as an emergency mental health worker for York and Adams County, and that was before my time here at the college. So this is kind of my little bit of a standard self-care slide. Some of the topics I'm going to be covering today can be really triggering and sometimes harmful for some listeners or viewers. Please don't feel any obligation to turn your camera on. As Rebecca said, kind of as a housekeeping rule to keep your mic muted. Feel free if you have any questions or comments you want to drop in the chat, and then we can kind of help facilitate that talk. But you are no obligation to turn your camera on. If you need to step away from the computer, that's totally fine. You're never going to hurt my feelings by taking care of your needs. So what we're talking about today. We're going to start off the question of what's been happening lately. I'm going to talk about locally, state, federal, and like kind of as a nation, and what's going to happen with these cases that may be happening in Pennsylvania or Texas or Florida, and what creates a case precedent, and how that's going to affect the lives of other people that you may live in Texas and it's affecting you here. You may live in Seattle, and what's happening in Texas could affect you in Seattle. And what is kind of involved in the current policies and who they really affect, and how we can become agents of change and take the responsibility on us to help our community better. So this is kind of a spot for you to look in the chat and kind of think to yourself, what has been something that you've seen lately? This could be locally, something in the state. This could affect school boards. I'm going to talk a little bit about school boards and kind of reference any legislation. What are things that you've seen lately that you're interested in hearing about and how they've affected kind of the world? So go ahead and drop it in the chat. Doesn't look like anyone's putting anything in on my end. Rebecca dropped in transgender athletes in sports. So the question again was like, what's something that you've seen lately, locally in the states, something that's been affecting school boards? They've been recently talking about, as Rebecca dropped in, as transgender athletes or book bans for like critical race theory and representation. If it's something you've may not have been for here, but what if something you've noticed in other areas that may be brought up if it's going on there? Gender identity in elementary schools. Kids are very in tune to what is going on. Don't say gay bill. I'll talk about a little bit. One of the places really locally that has kind of had some representation for students wanting to see more representation was in Central York. As Lydia just said, was the Central York students fighting to have more representations and the books stay in the classroom and not be able to be removed. So why does what's happening maybe in Texas or in Florida with the Don't Say Gay bill, why does that matter like to us in Pennsylvania? Now, I'm not asking about it from a human rights perspective. I implore you to think of what a case precedent means. So Cornell Law School explains that case precedence refers to a court decision that is considered as an authority for deciding subsequent cases when they involve similar facts or similar legal issues. So if someone is bringing up legislation like the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, and they go through and that is ratified, they can take it in other cases, can publish other forms of legislation in other states. That Don't Say Gay bill in Florida has been mirrored in other places like Arkansas and Oklahoma very quickly. That wasn't very long ago that was going through in Florida, that is now being modeled in other states. So this is kind of an interesting breakdown of what is really out there and what policies there are. There's state and federal legislation. Every state has their own set of laws and the amendments to those laws, but there are often accompanying forms of federal regulations. Excuse me. There's also criminal and civil side of within the state and the federal system. Every state has a criminal code. Pennsylvania's is referred to as what's Title 18. Civil legislation can include things of the educational amendments for Title IX or the Cleary Act of 1990. There's also Supreme Court decisions that are kind of also in those talks with either anti-abortion bills or the Don't Say Gay bill, which is Obergefell v. Hodges or Roe v. Wade, and how those all kind of feed into each other. Now, another piece of the puzzle has been what's going on in schools. That's what everyone seems to be really focused on, is how it's going to affect the children. Things and policies that are affecting in the school are Title IX, the Cleary Act, critical race theory, and care for transgender students. This is an image that is included of a student walkout in recent months where students have rallied to support trans peers when school boards have been making policies that would limit the access to either the education or the benefits and programs. This is a walkout from Atlee High School, as a school in Virginia. It is in March of this year. It is specifically focused on trans students. So here's kind of a breakdown. What I want you to take note of is there's a lot of students that are going through the education system in the United States. In total, there's about 73.5 million students that were enrolled in the fall of 2020, either in hybrid models or in public or private, doesn't matter. That goes from K through 12 through higher education. 73.5 million students that are under the care specifically of the Title IX and the Department of Education. So what I've mentioned them are Cleary and Title IX. Cleary Act refers to the Cleary Act. Jan was a student in a higher ed institution who was murdered in her dorm room. There wasn't proper safety protocols in place, and someone was able to get into her dorm that shouldn't have had access to her building and was able to get into that and harm her. Her parents fought for legislation that would create institutes of higher education to have reporting of campus crime data, supporting victims of violence, the public outline of the policies and procedures that have been implemented to improve the safety on campus. This is published every year annually. I think it's due by October 1st every year, and it's called the Annual Security Report, or the ASR. Every institution of higher education should be able to find this very easily on the website. You can type in ASR and it should come up. Now, Title IX goes through for K through 12 programs and higher education. As long as they receive federal funds, applies to both, and it prohibits the sex-based discrimination in educational programs and activities. Sometimes people know that Title IX started from athletics and then kind of divvied down. It was to make it equal, and that you couldn't discriminate against like women's sports teams and provide more support to male sports teams. If I'm going too fast for anyone, please let me know. I talk a little fast. So here are the list of crimes that are covered under both the Clery Act and Title IX. You can see that there is some overlap in between the issues that are going to be covered under Title IX, which is listed on the right-hand side of your screen, versus the cases that are covered under the Clery Act crimes. For those involved in law enforcement in Pennsylvania, most of these are graded as felonies if you're looking at it. So all of the cases that fall under Title IX are considered Clery Act crimes, but not all of the crimes that are committed under Clery would be considered under Title IX. So why does it matter? And why does it matter in the discussion of we're talking about policies and how it affects women? Acts of sexual assault and dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking, or SADV/DVS, are often called acts of gender-based violence. Now, these crimes are often referred as women's issues, so most of our prevention and education is designed towards cisgender women. And so what that has created is limitations for male identifying folks or non-binary folks that don't feel that they can receive the adequate services from advocacy centers or research programs or hospitals because they don't subscribe or don't identify as women. And so we can't get the services that they're looking for. An example could be that in your local shelter, a domestic violence shelter may be designed as a women's shelter, and they don't have the capabilities to host a male survivor in the same space. And so that male survivor may really need a safe place to go and does not have access to one. So how many are we really talking? I want you to think about 1 out of 6 women will be the victim of an attempted rape or completed rape in their lifetime, and 1 out of 10 men will be the victim of an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. So when we're talking about these policies and how they matter, like I can think of 6 women in my life, 1 of them would be or could be the victim of a rape in their lifetime. About 21% of college students that identify as trans, gender nonconforming, or queer will be the victim of sexual assault. Not an if, it's 21%. Now this comes from RAIN in 2014. What I want people to notice is that with crimes of sexual violence or gender-based violence, it's very underreported. So this number is much higher than what it is listed as. We just don't have the data and the resources available to get that information because all we can run on has been what is reported. So this is reported crimes. This is not the cases that have gone unreported to law enforcement. So while a lot of my work can be a little doom and gloom, I think it's important to remember that everyone has the ability to be part of change. On the slide, there are 3 recent protests, including one from York County, where students at Central York High School hosted speakouts and walkouts when the school board had published a list of books that would be removed from classrooms. Many of the books that were written were by authors of color and did include stories of LGBTQ+ individuals and their families. Now, the work that the students did in Attention That It True paused a ban on the book list and reversed the decision. It was about like a month in between when they released the list, put it in place, and then reversed it. But this is work that students did at a grassroots level with just paint and signs and said we're not going to stand for this and wanted change. Volunteering and helping staff domestic violence or resource centers or polling places. So York County has a need for polls, and so you can work at the polls. And voting is a really big piece. Getting legislators that are interested in being change agents as well is going to be a big piece. So we have primary elections in Pennsylvania in May, and then the elections will be hosted in the fall in November. So where can you help? I implore you to look for the helpers and to look to the students and the kids. I've seen some kind of names that we're looking at here, and I know that there's some staff here at York College. The students and children are very aware of the injustice in the world. We can't protect them from everything, and they're very aware of what's going on between COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, financial crisis, etc. They're very aware of what's going on and the help that's kind of needed. Here are some local resources. This include YWCA Access York, Planned Parenthood, PCAR. PCAR helps staff the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. That's why it's slashed. PCADV is the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And then we have the Rainbow Rose Center. It is a nonprofit here in York that helps serve LGBTQ+ individuals. All states have advocacy or volunteer agencies. I have my contact information in a couple slides. So if you're interested in something that's back in your home area or want to share the information for someone that may need the support, I can help you get that. So this is kind of a spot if you have any questions. I know I talked a little fast, but if you have any questions for me of things that you want to ask or kind of get answered, I will skip over the slide because it will just keep moving. This is my contact information. And my toddler that keeps me very humble. Oh, thanks, Rebecca. And if you would prefer to ask a question that you would like not in the group chat, you can feel free to email me. That's my email here at York College. And just feel free to reach out if there's something that you would ask privately or interest of where you would think you would like to get involved. I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen now.
I have a question. Have you seen, like, in the time that you've been working with Title IX and things like that, have you seen any significant changes in policy, like, over the last few years that have impacted, like, how you do your work or that?
Yeah, so when I started as an advocate, we worked within the Title IX system as well. And when that happened, the Dear Colleague letter had been released from the Bidens were really involved in it, and the Obama administration and the Department of Education released the Dear Colleague letter of making the call to action that if you're going to be in compliance with Title IX, you need to also address instances of sexual harassment, not just discrimination within athletics. You have to go beyond that. And so that was in 2011. So when I started as an advocate in 2012, that was kind of shifting from taking more of that responsibility on as an institution. Now, I started here at York College in June of 2020, and the regulations were released, I think, at the end of June or right around the same time that I started. So we very quickly had to adjust to the Trump administration and the DeVos Department of Education and where they had created the changes within the policy. There were expansions in other areas that were expanded on. One of the big ones that we've seen a lot of, like, a drastic difference is that both parties are allowed to have attorneys as advisors now. So as before you could have an advisor, you could have someone sit with you. Now it's a step further that you're able to have an attorney, so it becomes more like a court hearing and process. So there has been a lot of policy changes. There's also changes coming up. The Biden administration it's already out there that they will be changing some regulations in the summer of 2022. So as an office here at York College and other Title IX offices, we're preparing of what that's really going to look like in the policy changes. And because you have to very quickly kind of be ready to comply, what that means is when the administration released the 2020 regulations, I think we had about 2 months. We had all of July, and we had to be in compliance, I believe, by August 14th. So mid-August of 2020. So we get about 2 months to be ready to be in full compliance with the new regulations and be ready to serve. So it does tend to be a quick turnaround time and can have some growing pains as we get used to them. But there's a pretty, I think it's 2,000 pages, the regulations. And so it's a lot to sift through, but it's a very important work. And so those changes are coming. Public opinion, the Department of Education has said if you would like to offer a public opinion on the Title IX regulations, I believe that's opening, I think, in May, to get some feedback of changes and where we want to go from here. So if you're interested in that, that's also available.
Thank you. Does
Now I
anyone-
did.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just dropped in the chat. We also have a Title IX email here at the college. If you have a concern that there's a Title IX interest, we also cover Your Country Day School in our services. But if you're interested in volunteering or getting involved or wanting more information, I dropped in our violence prevention email as well. Sorry, Rebecca.
No, that's all right. Does anyone else have any other questions before we wrap up? All right, well, if you think of anything, feel free to email us at cce@ycp.edu. We can pass that along. Thank you all for joining us for this talk, and for those of you who joined us earlier in the week as well. Thank you. We hope to do more of these kinds of talks in the future. And just a reminder, these recordings of these talks will be on our YouTube channel, the Center for Community Engagement's YouTube channel. So have a good afternoon, everyone.